Today I want to look at putting the dye onto the tile and HeatForm leather. So these are some of the masks I made with the HeatForm, and I've used the Identity water-based leather stains on them. Now this leather is, and I think some of you will have seen the mosaic tiles. If you haven't, go and look for that reel as well. I've got little pieces of them here. There we go. So they were with some of the paints on stenciling as well. So the paints are fine to go on, but we have got this wax content. So when you're putting any dyes or stains on, you're going to get kind of just understanding how that influences it. So this is a black one that I've got. You can see it's got very intense black on it. And I'm going to dye with the HeatForm. Not with paints, the paints need to go on afterwards, but with the stains you can actually do a layer and a couple of coats and everything before you shape and form it, which is a brilliant help, because when you're doing things like the mask particularly, it means you can get all of this in, all these tricky bits done while it's still lying flat before you shape it, and then you can go over and add any extra detailing. Did a little bit of moss and everything. I think it just shows up on there, it's a bit subtle. So let's get started. So when you order these leathers, they have all varying, this is just a base block ready for colouring. Now they do vary. You've got three quite different kind of ones there. That one's got quite a patchy kind of grain. This has got more brown tones into it. So that's obviously going to have a little bit of an influence, particularly when you're going to the lighter colours. But let's take this one, the middle one. It's got this browny grain on it. Okay, so I'm just gonna, put gloves on, obviously. I'm not very good at that myself. I like to just have my fingers. Piece of greaseproof paper I've got down, or whatever you're using for your dye mat, and I've got my colours as normal. I've got a little dish to tip my colour into so that I'm not contaminating my bottle, and I've got some of my cut and use foam pad cut up ready. Don't need a very big bit. These wash out, we get several goes out of them. I did find with the solvent bases that it dissolves the glue that holds the two together. So they work brilliantly for stains and for water base. Bit annoying if you're doing the solvent base, but you might have found that out already. Now I'm going to do a whole series. I want to make a series of bowls, and I want to have them really blacky indigo. I'm going to do some gold spatter on them. I've kind of been a bit inspired by some sort of astrology kind of night sky kind of that imagery of the indigo with gold. So that's what I'm going to aim for with these. So I've got the Identity Store leather stain in navy. So I'm just going to pour some into my dish. Don't need much. Now what you'll find with this is, I'm just going to scrape it over off the edge, but you'll find that it will initially want to sit onto the top surface. So you want to have a kind of cloth to hand, and you just want to move and work it over. And it will look a little pale, the first coat, although this is not bad having said that, but you can see it's lightening a little bit, going grey as I'm moving it around. So I'm just going to get, you want kind of your first coat on, just get it thin and nice and even. And with this is normally at this point, I would be wiping back off, but I'm leaving quite a bit on the surface, because what's happening here is it's taking a bit more time to penetrate through that wax and into the leather itself. So just keep working it and moving it, and you'll find that that will go down in between those grain pores as well. And you'll just get a little bit more of that going in than you would expect to when you're doing it normally. I'm just going to go around the edges with my sponge while I've got some left in it. Now when I heat form this as well on the edges, you can give these a bit of a rub down, and it gives you because you've got waxes already in it, you don't need to apply any other waxes for your edging. So you can, while it's warm and the waxes are soft, you can smooth all of those edges around, which is really good to know as well. You just have to watch, because the leather's a bit softer, that you don't bend it a bit. So I've got my first coat on, and it's gone quite grey. So if I was doing that on veg tan at this point, it would be looking much more dark, much darker kind of navy. So with my cloth, which has gone walkabout, I'm just going to give it a little rub over, and what that does is just lifts off anything that's sitting on the top surface still, and it also takes away any of this sort of lines from the applicator. So that's coat number 1. Now you can let it dry, but you can work fairly quickly with this, so you can go straight away once you've buffed that away. I should be able to go and get another coat on. The more you leave a little bit more drying time between, the more you're not moving around any that's still wet on the top surface. So, but for the purposes of this, we'll just keep going, and we're just going to keep building up some layers. So same again, you'll need a lot less each time you do it. You need a lot less on the sponge. And then what I'm going to do now is I want to make it a little bit blacker. So I am going to mix in a little bit black around the edges, but keep the centre bit a bit blue. Let's pour a bit of the Raven black. Feels very poetic. I'm going to use the same sponge for my black because it will give me a deep blue for the blending. And I'm just going to take that from the edges and round. I think you should be able to see that on the camera quite nicely. And this is how you can get some blending going. So I've got this now, and because it's sitting on the surface as well, it's actually quite nice to do blending with because it gives you a little bit more time to move the colours. So I've picked up a little bit more of that navy, and now I'm going to meet the navy and working it into the middle. And it just looks a bit of a smooth, you can see the applicator marks, so just keep working them over. Keep it moving at this point and it will find its level, find its place. And then when you think you've got it moved in where you want, you can then go back to just wiping that top surface off. You can't always tell until it's dried quite back how it's going, so again that's another reason for giving it a little bit of more drying time between. But I'm beginning to get a nice kind of inky black. Oh, it's so hard to show, isn't it, with the colours? But you can see there's a nice deeper line around the edge appearing and the more blue going on there in the centre. So I'm just going to put a little bit more on into those areas just to even my blend out a bit from the sides. Now I'm going to carry on and do a few more and then come back and join me and I'll shape it into a bowl. I've got some of them dyed, so the next stage is to iron them. So you can have the iron on quite a hot setting for this. You want to get it good and hot. And I've got some greaseproof paper on the top, and you're just going to press over and you'll see that the paper will get a sort of dark sort of shade on it as the wax is melting, so it gives you an idea of where your wax is melting. Keep going over. I think you probably need to do a good 2-3 minutes and flip it over and do the other side. You want to get it soft, so you're trying to get all of that wax melted the entire way through the leather so that the leather is really sort of supple. And you'll need to have everything else ready, so have your colander, which works a treat, ready, and have a balled up bit of cloth, just something lint free, something like an old piece of sheeting or rag, because you'll find as you're pushing down with your fingers that your fingers will leave little marks, and if you have this balled cloth you can kind of push around as you're forming and remove those marks. So have all those things ready, and I'm just going to keep going with this until I can feel it getting more soft. Okay, so I've ironed this. I've got to flop. Now you want to make sure that the heat is distributed evenly so you've got no stiff bits, so you should be able to just feel it flopping. It is quite warm and hot to the touch, so just be careful at this point. You can let it cool a little, but obviously you want to be able to work it. So I've got it over the top. I'm going to start just by really slowly pressing down from the centre with my fingers spread as much as I can. Now you'll see it's beginning to bend and it's easing in around the rim. So you want this easing sense to avoid any pleating. You may get a little pleat, which you should be able to just press out. So just, it's really kind of going slow. I'm just really tiny incrementally pushing down as it's giving and as it's taking the form and the shape. You can probably hear it squeaking. You want to try to get it going down so that you've got an even amount of rim showing each time, so you're moving all of the whole thing down at the same time. Or if you're turning it and you notice that you've gone further down on one bit, then try and ease it back by keep turning and looking at where you're going. Now you'll see it's beginning to take quite a good shape there, and I've got no pleats, it's pushing the air out through it. Going to keep going. I quite like, if I can, to get it right to the bottom, because I've got a nice flat bit on here and it gives me a nice flat base to my bowl. Okay, so this is where you go too quick for the camera, I got a little pleat bubble starting there. So I've just pushed it back, pulled it back up, and I'm just pressing it back out. It sort of has muscle memory, so it will kind of remember that area. So I'm going to put my thumb on it and just work from there. So it is just a case of going slowly. If you get one, don't worry about it. You can go to your slicker and give it a rub over just to sort of bend it back the other way and smooth it out if it's made any sort of little crease. I'm going to stand now because it's easier. And I'm nearly at the bottom. Okay, and when you think you've got it to where you want it, I think I'm going to stop there. I'm just going to check it is even around. I have in the past had bowls where I've drawn a line around, so that once I'm using the same circle of leather each time, I know where to push down to, and I know how to keep it level so that I haven't got sort of sideways skewy bowls. Okay. Right, I think that's going in quite well. So I'm now just going to pick up a bit of a lint-free cloth, a sponge, and I'm just going to kind of really rub and work it and sort of polish it in. It's sliding a bit. That means it's cooling a little bit quicker. I'm just going to polish in that surface and around, just to give that surface, while it's got that heat and warmth, just a nice smoothing. And this is a good time as well to smooth off your edges. So because the wax is soft, you can use your slicker, rubbing it in against, just keep a hold of it. And you can rub and slick into that hot wax, which will just smooth out and give you a nice burnish on those top surfaces. Once it's hardened, you can do a little bit more work on that, but I find that's usually enough to get quite a good smoothing. Now, generally it takes a bit of time to cool down and dry, and you don't want to kind of take it out until it's ready to just fall out itself, because you might alter the shape if it's still a bit soft. So you should be able to, once it's cooled down, just tap it and it will fall out. And then just leave it. So I'm just going to check it's sitting straight. Got a little bit of height on this side, so I might just put it back in. If you need to, you can just get your hot air gun or a hairdryer and just soften again in certain areas just to press through and to reshape. But I think if you can get it all done in the first go, it's obviously better. Now you will notice that the dye that I put on went darker because of the wax melting into it. So this has come out darker than originally. And then this one here. And you'll see, this is my better one, this one you'll see a little bit of the finger marks and things where I was pressing in when it was still warm. So you get this kind of patina and handmade effect on it, a bit like you would with clay. But I'm going to put a paint, use some of my paints to get a little bit more depth to the colour and things at this stage, and get them looking a bit night skyish. So that's this. Have fun.